Hello and welcome back to a new video. In this one, I'm building the spider jet from scratch. Without further ado, let's get to the build. So for this project I'm using scrap items like hair gel container, contact lens solution bottle and its cap, acetone bottle, detergent bottle cap, various candy dispensers, random plastic bottle caps, pill boxes, plastic spoons and of course cardboard cuts. I stripped off labels, cleaned, cut, hacked off extending bits from the first pieces, then started to glue them together to form the most basic shape of the fuselage of the plane. I used hot glue instead of CA glue because I had to wiggle each piece until I had all the parts line up nicely. Next, I used the candy dispensers for air intake sections. Originally, these were supposed to be weapons bay or something like that, but I found it to be more fitting to have air intake right underneath the cockpit area. Once I had the basic shape of the fuselage, I started to work my way to get it a pair of wings with cardboard. In order to give it a bit of a thickness, I used candy dispensers so the wings would have enough surface to attach to the fuselage. It was a very weak contact point for the glue, so I used baking soda to make it stronger. Did the same to the other side of the wings and attached two more of the same plastic dispenser pieces to have a bit of a textural difference for the final result. Right over the intake section, I added a pair of winglets. After that, I started working on two engine pieces. For this, I used pill boxes, dare caps, CA glue caps and plastic bottle cap pieces. At this point, it was time to work on the tails. For this plane, I wanted a pair of them instead of just one. I think it's just my visual awareness to the modern 5th gen stealth aircrafts. They all have a pair of diagonally positioned tails. For the cockpit, I decided on the spot where I wanted, and decided to use a plastic spoon for it. I planned to have a pilot sitting in there, so it had to be transparent. This was especially hard since you can mishmash cardboard and plastic parts to a point. I had to fill up holes and gaps with baking soda and CA glue off camera. Next, I started to work on the underbelly of the aircraft. This also was rather challenging due to aircraft needed to look somewhat aerodynamical. After that, I added a second layer of cardstock on the wings to make them look thicker and have a panels added kind of look. For the air intake parts, I inserted cardboard cuts because it looked way too empty in there. Later on, I added a CA glue cap to make the nose look pointy.
It is too round on the top, it needs to be pointy.
I put together a pair of made-up apparatus to go behind the back of the aircraft, and crafted a pair of random panels to fill in the gaps further. Using bottle caps and such, I made pylons where I could attach weapons, fuel tanks and such under the wings. One piece led to another detail. I added more bits and pieces here and there. Cut off the rear end and started working on engine exhaust section or whatever it's called. I added CA glue and baking soda by the tips and sanded off the excess to make the wings look smoother. With cardstock material, I started adding the final panels details. Since I can't make smooth looking precise panel details, I went a bit cartoony or arcade-like here and exaggerated some gaps and lines. Also added a pair of letters and the number 13 to mimic the plane's unit number or something like that. Since I planned this plane to be hung from the ceiling when it's done, I added a total of 4 jewelry loop bits where I could thread fishing lines. Added more panels wherever I saw fit and it almost looked like it was done. Then I remembered I still needed to arm this thing. I wanted this plane to have rockets and guns. I started with a pair of rocket pods using plastic tubes and caps, and chopsticks for rockets. After that, I made a pair of gun platforms in which I imagined there would be a big cannon. But the boxy shape of it somewhat didn't match with the pylon I made out of plastic. So I got rid of them and glued them right over the wings. After that, using these pizza box table legs, I don't really know what they're called, I made guns to be positioned right at the tips of the wings. To finish up the cockpit, I wanted the canopy metallic lines where I could add rivets later on. For this I used air drying clay because I didn't want to use too much glue on the plastic spoon and mess up its transparency. Once it fully dried, I sanded off the uneven parts and then started the riveting process with the canopy. I used various sizes of jeweler bits as usual, as well as cardboard punches to mimic access hatches and such. Just as I always do, I sadly overdid this. To be honest, if I had even smaller beads, it would look better, as its riveting just looks too much, but it is what it is. To paint this, I'm starting with black primer inside the cockpit area and where darker areas would be. To the rest, I apply watered down black primer over 2 coats. And since I plan to paint this a yellowish tone, I'm using the closest color option primer, German green brown. I couldn't find a yellow primer in my local hobby store and thought this would do the job. It kind of did. In fact, I would have left it in this color, but I kept going. Wanted to have a smoother color transition, so I mixed cork brown and deep yellow and started to paint it with this mixture. After a couple of minutes, I hated the yellow idea since it takes infinite number of coats to fully cover with yellow paints. Some of you might know this. While thinking how I would save this, I painted certain parts with different colors, like medium flesh tone, which I have a lot and almost never use. At this point, I didn't even want to look at my yellow paints, which I was running out of, and was afraid I wouldn't finish the paint job. So I kept on mixing whatever I could find that is close to yellow with my limited supply of yellows. In order to differentiate the engine parts and rocket pods, I painted them with hockey colors. With some rust and bronze mixture, I painted the engine exhausts. With gunmetal color, I painted the gun nozzles and such. Planned on painting the unit marks with white, then I decided I couldn't be bothered with the multiple coats of white coverage over yellow and moved on with black. With a mixture of khaki brown and smoke colors, I dabbed on the rivets. This was mainly done to trick the eye to not see the bad brush strokes. Then I diluted this mixture and covered up the entire plane with it. Next, I applied natural steel over every single rivet for no reason. I just liked the way they popped up. For the pilots, I used a Russian tanker figure. That was the closest figure I had to a pilot. painted his entire outfit with green-brown, leather and anthracite grey colors. Once dried, I seeded him with regular white glue. And finally closed the canopy and glued it as carefully as possible with CA glue. Thank you for being here and watching this video. I hope you liked it and found it useful or inspiring for your own creations. Sorry that I had been away. Job, life necessities and responsibilities got in the way of my creation process, so it took me much longer to finish this. This ended up being my third Scratchbuilt futuristic or sci-fi-ish plane build. I think I'll make more of this in the future, hopefully without this many riveting details. Until then, take care and see you soon.